get to an FAQ page, maybe all the information is there, but there's 33 other questions being answered also in addition to mine.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of like, maybe it's like a dead end. It's like, well, where does this live contextually in the flow of information and the hierarchy of information? It just kind of sits there as like a repository. So I think, it's really about the language and the structure that creates the findability.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast, a show where we bring together Marcom leaders from both inside and outside higher ed to give you fresh perspectives on successful content creation and strategy in higher education. My name is John Azzoni. I'm the founder of Unveiled, a video production company working specifically with colleges and universities. Learn more about our work, including our subscription approach to storytelling at unveiled.tv. That's UNVEILD. And if you like this podcast, then you'll love the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my free weekly newsletter where we cover a lot of ground about content creation and strategy. Sign up at unveiled.tv/newsletter. All right, let's get on with the show. Today's episode hits on something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and honestly, something I've been kind of confused about, which is how do you actually structure your website content to answer questions without just having a big FAQ page with a bunch of unrelated questions that nobody's actually going to comb through and read and get any value out of. So my guest today is Georgy Cohen, a digital strategy leader with more than 20 years of experience working in and with higher ed. She led website strategy at Tufts University and Suffolk University before spending 11 years at OHO, a digital agency serving higher education, where she founded the content strategy practice and led a team of strategists as VP of Digital Strategy. And a few things came up in this conversation that I think are going to stick with you because they stuck with me. She makes the case that the biggest mistake people are making right now with AI search optimization is that they're in panic mode. They're trying to do too much. They're feeling behind the curve, and they're being told this new wave of advice of stuff that they're supposed to be paying attention to, and they're trying to do all the things at once. And she has a really grounding way of reframing this whole thing that I think a lot of overtaxed marketers are going to appreciate hearing. She also gets pretty direct about how higher ed's tendency to play it safe and be generic online is costing them the actual findability that they're looking for. And we also talk about this need to balance what AI is looking for without losing sight of just being a normal human and writing for the humans that are visiting your website. She has a very human forward perspective that I think will help make a lot of sense out of this. Really great conversation. Let's get into it. All right. Well, Georgy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's start off on a tangent here. What's as we like to do on this show, let's just get off track right away. What's something that you've been nerding out about lately? It doesn't have to be work related, anything.
Well, so something about me is that I like to give myself little quests. Like, I live in Boston, right? So I love exploring the city. But I don't like just like wandering around aimlessly. I like to have little sort of quests. Like, I'm going to go here and have the breakfast, or I'm going to go to that part of town and go to that place. So one of my quests recently, which has been sort of an ongoing series of quests, is finding mini art vending machines.
Oh.
So I don't know if you ever heard of the Artomat, but basically Artomat, and there's a website where basically they take old cigarette vending machines and fill them with art. And there's Artomats all over the country. And I'll show you one of my first Artomat pieces that I ever got, which is this little, probably, I don't know if it's inverted on that thing, but little David Bowie woodcut thing.
Oh, cool.
And so they're just like, it's like wood, and then like the canvas is put on the wood. And so I've been fortunate enough to encounter 3 Artomats in my life. And whenever I travel, I always go see if there's an Artomat where I'm traveling. And then recently at the Boston Contemporary Art Museum, they had another mini art vending machine. And I got these 2 little prints that I framed them. They weren't framed when I got them.
Love that.
And they were $1 each. And I'm like, this is so amazing because I love art. And I just like the quirkiness of the mini art vending machine. So if anyone knows of any mini art vending machines in the New England area, please find me, message me. I will go on a quest and I will get some more mini art to add to my walls.
I'm trying to Google real quick if Detroit has any, because I want in on this.
The 3 I've been to have been in Boston, Alfred, New York, and Las Vegas. So it's 3 different locations in the country as you could possibly have. But
yeah. Well, there was one in Detroit at C-Pop, which is a contemporary art gallery, and I don't think that exists anymore. So maybe the Artomat went with the gallery as well.
Maybe.
But anyway, that's really cool. I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
I went to art school, so I'm an artist, and
Oh,
I
cool.
love little prints like that. Yeah. So for people who are listening, you showed me like a woodcut of David Bowie,
Yeah.
and then there was like a print of just a pair of scissors, and then a print of like the old composition notebook with all the black and white speckles on it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Love it. Okay, so give us a bit about your background in content strategy and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I went to school for journalism and I ended up working at the Boston Globe right out of college. That's the big newspaper in Boston. I worked on the breaking news desk for the sort of the online version of the paper, and that was a wild, wild time. It was during the war in Afghanistan and the Patriots first Super Bowl and lots of amazing milestones. It was really a unique time, and I could have, had a better first job, I think. But I actually went to work in higher ed because there wasn't really any room for growth at the paper. And when I'd been in college, I had a student job in the alumni publications office where I got to write articles for like the School of Education newsletter and things like that. And I just really liked the vibe. I wanted to write more. So I got a job at Tufts University and I was there for 7 years. And by the time I left, I was kind of leading the web there. It was when social media like originated. So it was a wild time where it's like, we have an institutional Twitter account. What do we do? And no one higher up cared. Like everyone was like, either it's unimportant or whatever. So I just kind of did whatever I wanted. It was at that kind of Wild West time of like, I'm just going to do stuff and have fun. And it was really fun, but also, you learn a lot. And then as I'm going through that, like I started as like a writer, right? But then sort of grew into this sense of like, well, what am I writing? Why am I writing it? What's going to happen to it, right? If I'm going to write this article, like, how are we going to promote it? Like, where is it going to go? Like, so, the evolution to, from like, I write stuff, I have a journalism background to like content strategy, especially working in a sort of digital context, was beginning to really think about, not just the creative act of it, like, that's just the creation, the writing, but how things are published, who's involved in that process, how you're publishing it on the web, how people are finding it, how you're organizing it, how you're structuring it. So, and I'm a deeply nerdy person, so all that really, really appealed to me. Then I, had left Tufts and went out on my own for a year, and then I went back in house at another university, and then I worked at an agency for 11 years where I sort of originated the content strategy practice and all that. So, how I got to where I am today, it's really just, it's been this sense of like continuing to want to nerd out about this stuff and wanting to be in an opportunity to grow. And, I know like your newsletter talks about like higher ed storytelling and, you do a great job, I think, of really making some really important points. And, it's really easy, I think, to be trite about storytelling, like tell stories. But, I think that there's so many interesting and important layers to that act. And
Totally.
I think that, my approach has always been wanting to tell stories, but think about it really robustly, like a real kind of 360 view of what does that mean, right? From the I have an idea to, how it's being distributed, how it's being structured, how it's being found, how are we managing this? Like all of those kind of like that the context around like the idea of a story. And so that's really a key aspect or I think of how content strategy has played out in my career. And working in higher ed has just been tremendously rewarding, both in-house and as like a vendor partner, because I really believe in the mission. It really means a lot to me. And higher ed, the thing I would say is like higher ed is full of stories. You throw a rock on campus, you're going to hit 12 stories like instantly. They're just all around you. But then there's this interesting challenge, like, well, I can't tell them all. Which
Mm-hmm.
ones are going to, are the most meaningful to what end? And how do I go about doing that? And that's always been a great challenge for me to help, for me to, on behalf of institutions I worked at and to sort of help, partners sort through. So it's just been continually finding challenge and trying to find better ways to empower these great stories to support the mission of the great institution of higher education.
And you're so right about storytelling because it's a word that gets thrown around so much. And I have spent my entire career like, I always just think about it. Like, what does that mean? And I feel like my understanding of the word storytelling evolves year after year
Yeah.
as you know the internet evolves and stuff like that. And so whereas I used to be really on the side of like, oh, everything you do has to be like really compelling and it has to be emotional and stuff like that. I've also kind of come around to the fact that like for someone that's considering a school and they're, you know, you're on their short list of schools or whatever,
Hmm.
a story, a literal story might not be what they need in that moment.
Hmm.
What they might need is just like well structured information,
Hmm.
you know, that's going to lead them to a decision. And so I think you're totally right. Like within storytelling, there is this emotional aspect. And when I say emotional, I don't mean like sappy sobbing or anything, but
Yeah.
just like something that kind of connects to the heart. But there's also a strong need for actually making that information and that narrative valuable to somebody beyond
Hmm.
just blowing smoke about stories for story's sake.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, when I work with schools, they're like, storytelling is important. We need more stories on our site. And whenever like little alarm bells go off in my head, I'm like, that's an amazing sentiment. But immediately I have 33 questions to ask about where are we finding these, who's writing them, how are we creating, it's and that's what I love to do is to sort of figure out how we can do that. And we know like higher ed, it's often a challenge of staff and resources. I'm like, but this is an important thing because I think when you have that well structured information, you still need some context around that. So it's like, here's the financial aid process, or here's the tuition, but here's a story of someone who, wouldn't have been able to go to college without the support that the school gave them through financial aid, and look at them now, right? So, or even a stat that says like, hey, like, through our aid packages, like, X% this happened. Like, piece of data can tell a story too. So I think you make a really great point. It's like not everything has to be this like floral, beautiful, like,
Mm-hmm.
emotional enterprise, but I think the two can work hand in hand because a lot of these decisions where you need clear processes and well structured information, it just needs to be very, very clear and functional, but they're emotional decisions. They are emotional transactions. Should I go to the school? Do I want to pay this much money? Can I afford this? Well, great. Here's this clear information that explains it to me. And here's some context that responds to that emotional piece. So, I think it all goes together.
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, I posed the question if you know people wanted to submit a question, and Kristen Hansen from LinkedIn gave us a question that works better at the front of the episode here. So we're just going to jump right into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Kristen asks, "What are the biggest mistakes comms pros are making when trying to optimize for AI search?" And she goes on to say, "There's so much noise out there; it's hard to know what's sound advice and what's not." And I feel like that question, that sentiment, sets up the rest of this episode. So, how would you answer, Kristen?
Yeah, it's funny. I think my answer would be less about sort of like the ins and outs of AI findability and more about that noise piece. Is that, there's so much panic out there and so much like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? And I think it's unfortunate because like the last thing the higher ed marketers need is one more thing to feel behind the curve on and one more thing to feel guilty about. Is it important? Yes. Like, do we have to plan for it? Yes. But when everyone is more busy and overworked than ever, I think it could feel really like you can feel pressure to like, well, I have to panic. I have to stop everything else and focus on this. I have to, you
Yeah.
know, buy this tool or buy this audit or do whatever. And what I would think is like, all right, the good news is that the fundamental principles of clear communications are going to get you a long way there, right? They're going to get you most of the way there. And I feel like, higher ed has a very like unfortunate history of buying reports and audits and studies and having them sit on a desk. So I
Yeah.
think what I would say the biggest mistake is panicking and freaking out and stopping other, and it's like, okay, we need to focus on this, but I think, pick one area to focus on. Pick select key pages on your site. Focus on, before buying fancy stuff, whatever. It's like, I'm going to focus on this important information. What can I do to make this clearer and better organized? What can I do to structure this more effectively? I'm going to do some searches and see how we play out. So I think just being methodical and thoughtful, and the world isn't going to end tomorrow. Like, I feel for the hired marketers who, are always just like, oh God, here's one more thing I have to do that I have to learn. And it's like, okay, take a breath,
Yeah.
let's just start here. Don't feel like we have to boil the ocean. Let's just start right here and make this one thing better, and then we can move on to the next thing, the next thing.
That's perfect advice. And I was just writing, well, it came out this morning, my newsletter for this week, and it was going to be about that exact thing of like me feeling like I'm always behind and kind of like I think that a lot of higher ed marketers feel that way too. And what you said, just like
Mm-hmm.
one more thing to feel behind the curve on. And there's just so many things coming out. And the longer I do this podcast, the more behind I feel because I'm like, you get someone on here that's like, oh, you got to be on Reddit. And then now I'm
Like,
like,
oh crap,
now I'm
I'm
like
not.
all. And all of it's true. Like, all of it's true and all of it's helpful. But exactly what you said, which is like, this was the conclusion that I came to. And I abandoned this thought process in my newsletter and wrote about something else because I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah,
put my thoughts together fast enough. But just that, like, pick something
yeah.
that supports the core activities that are getting you the results that you want and just pick something small and just do it. And like, my tendency is to go all or nothing. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm behind on, like, for instance, I'm very behind on taking my newsletter and repurposing it to my blog because
Mm-hmm.
no search engines can crawl MailChimp newsletters.
Right.
And so my thought process is like, okay, every Monday, I'm going to like spend all day on Monday and just do that until I'm
Yeah.
all caught up. But then it's just kind of like, how about just spend 30 minutes a couple times a week
Mm-hmm.
on just that? And if you get through one, cool. Then as long as we're making continuous progress, and I think we don't give enough credit to like small efforts consistently that compound over time. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you just, like you said, just pick something small and
Yeah.
just do it, and then pick the next thing that's small and do
And
it.
prioritization. Like, you can have 1,000 things, but really these 23 are the most important. So I'm gonna set aside the other 1,970 whatever. Just focus on these 23 first, right? And then the other 1,000 or so, hold off.
Yeah. Here's one hill I will die on. Making one-off videos whenever your team or some other department decides they need one is the most expensive and wasteful way to do video marketing for your college. What you need instead is a system that provides you a steady stream of video content all year long, and that is what our video storytelling subscriptions are all about. Get a year's worth of videos that are primed for distribution across awareness, consideration, and yield for one price. Take the next step at unveiled.tv and book a call with me. I'd love to hear what you're working on. All right, let's get back to the show. So FAQ pages, I had discovered you long before, and I've been following you for a while, but this is the post that you posted that caught my attention. You're talking about FAQ pages and how to structure those on your website. So what are people in higher ed getting wrong about FAQ pages? Because we've talked about that a number of times on my podcast, and I see it all over the internet. Is like, your website should be an answer engine. And the question that always goes through my mind as someone that's not a web developer, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to SEO. I know enough to be dangerous, probably screw up somebody's complete SEO, but it's never really registered to me. Like, how do you do that? How should you answer questions? So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think like FAQs have just been this hot button topic for like forever. Like, as long as I've been in this industry, there's always a lot of hand wringing about FAQs. And I think that the intention is good. I'm gonna give credit where credit is. Like, yes, we want to provide information that addresses people's questions. Here's a really sort of logical way to present that, right? But it has this habit of becoming a dumping ground that just quickly uses usability. Once you put information in an FAQ, it's not in a logical place. It's in kind of a catch-all place. So how do I know where it lives? How do I know what's there? If it's also on another page in another context, now I have two instances of the same information. How does the user reliably know where to find it? And according to whom is it a frequently asked question? So when you're saying like, okay, but it's important, especially in this age of conversational search experiences where people are using AI tools to ask questions and expect answers, right? How do we do this? And I think, there's been a sort of a resurgence of like, well, FAQs, this justifies their existence because it's going to naturally match that kind of question and answer dynamic that the user has with the chatbot, and that's what we should just do. We should do that. So, yes and no. I think that there can be a value to reflecting that dynamic, I'll call it, within your content. But, keep in mind that, right now, web experiences more than ever are kind of playing on two levels. There's kind of like the human level, like you and I'm looking at my computer, I'm looking over here. Okay, there's a web page. I see some stuff, like there's information. I'm looking at it with my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, like it's communicating to me. But then like there's this other layer of structured data that is being found by search engines, by AI tools, by all these other kind of like robots that are out there looking for content. And it's like going fishing. It's like, you want something to snag on. So how can you make your information snaggable and structured such that these tools can find it, and it will, when someone asks like, what are some MBA program options in my town that are part-time that I can go to after work, how are they going to find your information as relevant to that query? So when you're thinking about how to sort of build those experiences, and you can think about it in terms of, from a simple structural sort of frame of mind, is like, headers and copy, making sure that you have keywords and you're using language, especially in like those header tags, which are really have high semantic value for search engines to say. You can phrase it as a question. You can be like, what is this? What is that? And have that kind of like interrogative FAQ-ish type feel. But I think the most important thing is to think about the words themselves and how you're structuring them, both visibly and then, sort of like below the surface there, and making sure that the information is, in a context where, it's going to have relevance to other information. We have pathways to relevant actions and other relevant pages on your site and things like that. So you're not like, you get to an FAQ page, maybe all the information is there, but there's 33 other questions being answered also in addition to mine.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of like, maybe it's like a dead end. It's like, well, where does this live contextually in the flow of information and the hierarchy of information? It just kind of sits there as like a repository. So I think, it's really about the language and the structure that creates the findability. The question mark is not as meaningful as I think people want it to be. But I think we just have to start thinking about, understand that there's different levels at which this information is operating. We have to attend to the human experience and the robotic, I'll call it, experience.
Yeah, and I find comfort in that because it seems like anytime the internet evolves, it always kind of comes back around to just make good content for humans,
Yeah.
and kind of like what you were saying earlier, just the fundamentals of clear communication, and yeah, it's like a new thing we should do. Everyone kind of goes sidesteps and goes, how do we hack the algorithm?
Yeah.
Let's make a big FAQ page. And then we always come back around to like, okay, this has to actually work for the person visiting the website. So you're saying kind of just more like, what I'm hearing is give priority to the human experience and that natural flow of how somebody consumes information on your website, but also kind of like keep in mind some of the things that, the AI is looking for, like the headers and, maybe how you structure some things, or is
Yeah,
there more to it than that?
you can have that information and you can present it, but so I know something that came up actually in the comments of that LinkedIn post was the idea of schema markup, which sounds like we're going like full tech head here, but not really. It's thinking about, you can have language that, to me, the human, I'm just reading it and it's fine, but in the background there's markup that is helping that information stand out. So the way
Hmm.
I think about that is like, HTML, it's not a programming language. I'm not building apps with HTML. It's markup. I can put bold tags or strong tags around a word. The word is not changed. The words around the word are not changed, but now it has emphasis, right? That's markup. I kind of applied a style to it. So schema tagging, which is really the product of kind of the big boys like Google and Yahoo coming together to create kind of like a shared vocabulary of structure for data and information on the web. The way that it works is, being able to turn that content, that word, let's say, into structured data that could be more easily found. And it's not necessarily visible to me, the visual web user, but it's visible on that kind of like that search layer. So basically it means that we're sort of defining common information types like events or articles or recipes, for example. So think about like a recipe. We can label carrot as ingredient. We can label cuisine as Thai, right? We can even label 30 minutes as cook time, right? So I could be reading and be like, oh, we're going to have this carrot dish and it's a staple of Thai cuisine and you can have dinner in under 30 minutes. And that feels like a natural language sentence to me, the human. But on the background, we're kind of providing emphasis to those languages. So if someone searches for like, what are easy Thai meals to cook in under 30 minutes? I can find that. So it helps with that sort of, I can read that as a human and it makes sense to me. But there's also this tagging and turning that information into structured data that is really visible and clear to those search engines. And there's a bunch of sites, and I can share some links with you if you want to include them in your notes that
Mm-hmm.
can help people just kind of give a space to kind of play and learn more about this stuff. It sounds like deep nerdery. And it is to some degree, but I like that. But I think it's an important, like, kind of like next step to be thinking about how to, as we're thinking about sort of striking that balance between content that is clear to the human but findable by the machines. Like there's a way to do that, and we can sort of just, add that element to our content planning process. Again, not biting off more than we can chew.
Yeah. Definitely. We'll put those links in the description. And there was also in our pre-call, you mentioned an author that you follow that talks a lot about. So while we're talking resources, do you want to talk about her?
Yeah, her name was Karen McGrain. So there's a lot of like, you talk about sort of my content strategy origin story. There's a lot of, parallel to my like immersion in the higher ed community. I also am deeply immersed in sort of like the content strategy community. And there's certain folks who have been kind of like bellwethers of knowledge and insight in that field. And Karen McGrain is one of the first people who really started talking about structured content because, I think, in the early days of the internet, people just like, open a page and type words and save it and upload it to their site. And she would call it like a blob. Like she's like, like,
Mm.
here's some words. But when we apply structure, for the human, it can create hierarchy, it can create organization, right? It provides an organization connotes meaning. And then that's valuable to both, again, the humans and the robots as well. So I think that in the post that I'd seen from her recently, she was basically saying like, it's the same thing, like kind of what we were saying earlier. Like it always comes back to good content. Like these fundamentals of like content strategy and information architecture, where we're just really thinking about how to manage and plan and organize and structure content effectively. Everything old is new again. And,
Mm-hmm.
these fundamental skills continue to show their value and their importance by even in this world, okay, oh, now we're all worried about like getting our content ready for AI visibility. It's like, cool, okay, this isn't something totally new. Like we're just kind of adapting some of these principles to this new context and kind of tweaking the approach a little bit. So I can't help because I have a foot in both worlds, but I think that there's a lot of those insights I try to bring over to the higher ed discourse. I think there's a lot of valuable insight beyond like, kind of like, the marketing, the brand. And I think that's where a lot of the higher ed dialogue around communications and marketing is focused. And I'm like, we need to talk more about the structural pieces and the governance pieces and the strategic pieces because that's where all the great ideas and brand and those marketing goals, that's going to be the engine that really helps all that sort of move forward. Those are the inner workings that are going to help propel that content to be successful towards those marketing ends. So we really got to bring those conversations together. So I like trying to do that.
Great, perfect. And so I want to talk about, I don't know if this would be considered governance, but this gap between like the fact that there are important web pages often owned by subject matter experts, not content strategists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, maybe marketing directors listening to this might have a vested interest in a landing page about, like a program landing page or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard from folks that, they'll get maybe a faculty member to write the content for that. But then like, how do we bridge that gap to like making sure that that stuff is structured properly? How do you work that?
Yeah, I think you were right to sort of introduce that question in the context of governance because it's really like who owns what part of this, right? It has to be a partnership. I can't go in a cave and write a landing page about the new MBA program, and neither should the dean or the faculty chair go in a cave and write that page. We need each other. And, I'm sure you've heard the stories that, within some institutions, people can be like, well, I'm very smart because I'm a PhD and what are you? You have a bachelor's degree. Like, I should write this because whatever. It's like, you're already expert on economics
Yeah.
or cybersecurity or whatever, but I am the expert on strategy and marketing. So we're only going to get this done if we work together. So I think in thinking about creating those partnerships, I think it's really the relationships that you build as a marketer within your institution are critical to making those moments of we need to create this landing page be as friction free as possible. And those relationships often mean talking to the leadership, talking to the deans, building relationships between the CMO and the provost, so everyone's on the same page about like how this needs to go. So when that, oh, we need a new landing page for this new program moment comes down, there's an understanding that, okay, the marketing team, they're going to own the design and the writing. We have the brand, we're going to apply it in this way. Cybersecurity subject matter expert, come here. Like, we have these questions, like, what are the outcomes? What are the differentiators? Like, what's notable? What do students learn? Like, get that information and then frame it in that marketing framework. But it has to be a partnership. And I think the stronger the relationships are on all levels, right? I think there's so many marketing teams that, for whatever reason, whether it's due to like weird history or just the way that they work, aren't as connected to the academic enterprise as they should be, or there's some animosity there. And it really starts at the top and sort of like, cultivating a sense of like, okay, here's how we're going to get these things done. And it's also really important, I think, to show the value of that approach. So bringing in the analytics data, bringing in the conversion data, showing examples of user testing where it's like, well, here's the page that you wrote, and here's like 10 students who did not know what you were talking about or what it meant, right? Here's the video of them struggling, to be able to sort of show empirically whether something is working or not working. So having that kind of empirical evidence can be really valuable when you're working with those academic subject matter experts. But I think the crux of it is relationships up and down the chain to sort of, lay the foundation for a strong partnership to get that really important work done.
Yeah, it reminds me of, so my wife is a trauma therapist, and she's studied the effects of trauma on the brain, and she's very good at what she does, almost too good, because when she talks about it, it's so academic. And so she has a website, she has her own private practice, and then she has a scholarship fund to like raise money for people who need trauma therapy that their insurance won't cover it. So there's a lot of marketing that goes into that side of the thing to like, for fundraising and stuff like that. And so every year we'll do a video or like kind of like a year end, here's what we did kind of thing, here's the impact we made. And like I always have to like filter her script because it's so academic and so wordy, and we just laugh because we'll be filming and I'll be like, Laura, no one knows what that means. You're talking to like these really academic people, your funders are just normal people. So it's just like you really do need multiple people in the room with different disciplines that can translate for each other.
Yes. And having a sense of mutual respect that is reinforced by the leadership to be like, we're going to work together. Like, everyone has an important role. Here's how this is going to get done. As subject matter expert, you review for accuracy, not for style or brand or things like that. And having that be really clear in that everyone is sort of like aware of that, and there's investment from the top on that this is how this is going to go and all that. So totally.
Yeah. That's important too. Like, this is to say what it is that we're looking for your feedback on. Because like, I don't like when I send someone something I wrote for feedback and they're like, I just want like general, like, does this make sense or is this compelling? And they're like, no, you put a comma in the wrong place, and they're like restructuring this.
Did not want to copy edit. What are you doing?
Yeah. Okay, so next question is, AI tools are actually looking for point of view when deciding what to surface. A lot of higher ed plays it very safe and generic with their content, and a lot of like explaining like this is what this program is about. And I think we often leave point of view on the back burner. How do you recommend schools address that attention, or should that even be a part of the higher ed, I don't know, strategy to have a point of view about a certain industry when you're discussing a program about that industry?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I could have a point of view about a lot of things. What is the most relevant point of view? And I think the most relevant point of view to have is about yourself, and being able to say, not just generically, like, can you express like where you have a strength? Can you validate that with statistics? Like, for many reasons beyond like AI findability, like so many institutions need to get over this reluctance to have a point of view or have an attitude or have a approach. Like, we don't do it this way, we do it that way. Because when you play it safe and try to be everything to everybody, you're quickly going to become just this generic mush.
Mhm.
And, for so many reasons, higher ed needs to, find a way to balance clarity with identity, right? You don't want to go over the top in terms of like, oh, we're this way, rah, 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 that I don't actually know, like, well, where's the information? Like, you're talking about yourself too much. So it's like balancing a sense of like, hey, here's the information, here's some clarity, but also, you know, here's why we're special and how we do this, or we have this attitude, or we do it this way. I don't know, Tracy Halverson, she created this interesting tool about looking
Mhm.
at like the blanding as opposed to the branding of higher ed, where everyone's like, we have a rigorous this and we are best in class this, and it's like, oh my god, like, say something meaningful, say something distinctive, use language that not everyone else is using, like, talk to me about you and what makes you different. Is it that you're in Manhattan and wow, that really, the energy and the connections infuse everything we do? Or is it that you're in the country, you're a rural, and like, be distinctive, in this highly competitive climate that we're in, where so many schools are just like fighting to hold on, and demographic cliff and all this stuff. It's like you have to find a way to stand out, and that plays in both in terms of like the AI findability piece, but also just in your sort of visible marketing, and be something distinctive. And the people to whom that matters, who are like, whoa, that's what I want, they're going to build that affinity and gravitate towards you. And the people for whom it wouldn't be a good fit, like, you're qualifying them out, but you're qualifying the folks that are going to resonate. So for like a million and 10 reasons, I think higher ed needs to move away from the safety of sameness and lean into who they are and start being a little bit unapologetic about that. It's really hard in this day and age and this climate to feel unapologetic about yourself sometimes, but I think that that's really the kicker. That's a lot of institutions just veer away from, and I think it's to their detriment that they do that on 100 different levels.
Yeah, I feel like business schools and data science schools and stuff probably have an easier time selling AI as having a point of view on it. They're probably able to write about like AI is the future and we need to equip our students for this kind of world and all this stuff. So it kind of naturally lends itself to a belief about the
Mm-hmm.
subject matter. But, it's different if you were like a political science program or something where it's like
Right.
you don't want to now take a side, right or left, necessarily as an entire institution, but like finding ways to maybe, I would assume, talk about what you believe about the world that would resonate with all people. That goes beyond just like not so much what you believe about the student experience. Like we believe in small class sizes and we believe in rigorous, academic performance and whatever else. But it's like, what do you believe about the way the world should work with from the context of this program?
And every school has values, it has roots. Like, faith-based institutions have a whole faith identity that they're based on. Small liberal arts colleges have the ideals of a founder that are like imbued into, like, I started this school so that people may have XYZ types of opportunities. Great, let's infuse that into every program. And how does that come out, right? Like, it's not about like, I believe in X and if you believe in Y, you're wrong. Like, it's not a point of view that way. It's just like, we are different. Like, we have a way of doing things that is this, and it's unique to us. And leading with that and tying these things together, like, you don't want to see a biology program page. It's like, according to Webster's dictionary, the definition of biology is the study of human life. It's like, but there's so many program pages that like start like that basically, and it's like,
The Webster's dictionary opener drives me crazy. I used to film weddings for a living at the very beginning of my career, and every
according to Webster's
bridesmaid
dictionary, definition
toast,
of love.
the definition of love is, oh my god, just like I couldn't help but roll my eyes. I had to like watch my face,
And you're
in front
like,
of all these guests.
divorce, 6 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, okay, like, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to be sold. Like, why you, why this, why now? Like, Webster's not going to do it for me. Like, tell me what's special about this. You got 10 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And then user research is an important component to you and the work that you do. Tell me like what you feel about user research. How should that be done? How does it factor into building content that answers questions?
I think, it's really easy, even in this industry for a long time, to be like, I know what they want. Like, I have a deep understanding of prospective students. Like, clearly they want this and that and the other thing. It's really easy to sort of assume need and intent. And we probably have generally the right ideas mostly, but prospects are not a monolith. There's segments within, there's subsegments, they have different needs and questions. And also, those needs and questions evolve over time. Like, think about where we are in this moment, economically, politically, socially, culturally, et cetera, than we were 5 years ago. Prospective students, whether you're graduate, undergraduate, whatever, you're in a different place than your peer was, 5 years ago. So the things you're asking about or concerned about are going to be a little bit different. Some concerns are consistent across, but others
Mm-hmm.
and others may have, no longer be relevant, and new ones have emerged. And we can't ever say like, I've done this for 10 years, so I know everything there is to know about prospective students, and I'm done learning. Like, these audiences are always changing and evolving, and you building in user research as a habit is something that I feel is critical to be able to have a live understanding of your audiences and what they need, what their motivations are, what their preferences are, what their concerns are. So you can plan digital experiences that are going to be clear, useful, usable, and relevant to them. And the more you account for their needs and answer their questions, you're reducing the friction between them, doing the things that you want them to do, like, filling out a form or, learning about this or going here or whatever. So, user research, I think, is really, I feel like it sometimes gets done like as like once every 5 years type of thing. It was part of like a website redesign or something like that. But I think there's even small ways. It doesn't have to be like a big 6-figure enterprise. Like, there's even small ways, like little surveys in the waiting room of the admissions lobby, or tabling in the campus center during lunch hour. Like, there's little ways that you can gain meaningful insights into what people are looking for, what their questions are, what they need, and building that as a habit within your marketing function can sort of help you keep a live feed of like, here's what they're wondering about, here's where their minds are at, their hearts are at, and then create content and build pathways that respond to that and then evolve as those needs and questions and preferences evolve.
Yeah, that's perfect. I want to talk to our admissions folks here and give an example of how to structure this type of data on a page. So let's take an example like a financial aid page.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a bunch about program pages, but let's take a financial aid page. How do you make that genuinely rich and findable and not just technically correct?
I think, a lot of things that we've talked about in terms of the structure and the organization, the tagging, like, attending to that layer, I think is important. I think kind of what we were talking about earlier also about like the balance between clarity and the storytelling piece of it, where, if you're going to have this process, you want to be thinking about it for the web user. How can I lay this out really clearly? How can it like not be like formatted in a dense way to automatically like, oh god, the text just giant blocks, and there's lots of jargon and acronyms I don't understand, and I'm done before I even really started reading it. I look at it and I just wince and I turn away.
Mm-hmm.
How can I sort of couple just like the basics of just clear formatting, plain language, readability, build in that sort of structure layer, and then sort of enhance it with this context around like, hey, like, families making less than X dollars don't have to pay tuition, and 95% of students get financial aid. And here's a quote from a student who says like, the school is so helpful in enabling my dream to come here. Like, it's all these kinds of pieces together that create a successful experience both on that sort of visible human end and in that sort of structured data, and creating that balance. And it makes me think, I saw this metaphor that someone shared on LinkedIn that I really loved in thinking about this, is like structuring your information is like making it legible. Like, I have the worst handwriting in the world. Like, I am just like the queen of chicken scratch. I write something and I'm communicating, and I could write very meaningful things, but very, 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 very small subsection of people can actually read what I'm saying because it's illegible. Let's just put it out there. But when you structure and organize your data well, it makes it more legible, not just to that the human audience, but that sort of the search engines that are sort of looking to find this information. So, we had to think about the legibility of the information on both of those ends so that it can be comprehended and pulled in to whether it's me as a human sitting here looking at a page with questions, or I'm typing a question into a search engine and wanting to get that rich information fed back to me. You got to structure makes it legible.
So in a recent LinkedIn post, you said, this was the LinkedIn post that I was referencing earlier. You said, basically, these are just ways to kill time until the widespread emergence of a true semantic web layer for agents to mine, complementing the visual web we humans are all used to. So tell me what you mean by that. Because, like, is all this stuff that we talked about not going to matter in the near
I
future?
think that a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, like, I've been talking about these kind of like two layers, right? And that's kind of what I'm getting at with that line is like, I feel like most of what we are spending time doing is often this visual layer that humans are looking at. And I do need to see a little more time spent creating that semantic layer, that layer of tags and structure that the search engines can find. I feel like that there's still a knowledge gap in higher ed a little bit around there, so that we can do things like create these kind of like FAQ-ish contextual elements embedded within pages and things like that. But there's, I think, another technical layer to grow and develop in terms of really leaning into the structured data aspect. So again, deep nerdery, but it's like, I think we're kind of used to looking off the coast of Antarctica and seeing the tip of the iceberg, be like, there's the iceberg. And it's like, well, we just are looking at part of it. There's a lot below the surface that we're not accounting for, that we need to start working on. But to our points from earlier, again, I don't want to cause panic. I think it's something where you can pick your battles and focus and prioritize and grow into it. Is it a priority to do this? Yes. All the data is pointing to, prospects using these tools more to do their searches and things like that. But, I think that we can be sensible about it and focused in moving in this direction.
Perfect. Well, in conclusion here, what is the most actionable place for a higher ed marketer to start if they want to move in this direction? So I'm thinking about like a marketing director, CMO, or director of admissions too, I guess, two separate camps, but like someone at that level that has, they have their hands a bit in the pot, but kind of managing the people involved. What would be the most actionable place for them to start?
I mean, I think one answer is to say, hire somebody, or get somebody to do like an audit and take stock of where you're at. I think that's a valuable tactic, right? Just to sort of like, what do we need to do? Like, there's all this hubbub, like whatever. But I think, I don't want to just have that be sort of like the pat answer. Like, I think that there needs to be a fundamental understanding that at that leadership level, that we need to have those kind of strategic and structural thinkers as part of our team. That is a critical need, and we need to sort of not just have great writers and great, sort of brand, brand marketers and design. Like, those are all extremely important, but we also need the folks who can create a bridge between the expression and the function. It's not that those are the right words, but someone to really take that expression and activate it in really meaningful ways across different layers. So I think just recognizing the need as that as a core skill for the team in some fashion. And, for individuals who are maybe not in leadership roles, I think, just being able to sort of, I feel like content strategy in higher ed had a moment like 10 years ago. And now I feel like it's a little bit less of a moment, and there's a lot more focus. And not that this is like unimportant stuff, but like more of a focus on like the branding and the SEO and pieces like that. But I think, getting a fundamental understanding of things like disciplines like information architecture and content strategy is important. And there's two really accessible books. Like, they're really short, they're really crisp and well written. Everyday Information Architecture by Lisa Maria Marquis and The Elements of Content Strategy by Erin Kassane. Finding those books, you read them in a couple hours, quite frankly, and then it would just give you a good way to think about information and content. And it lays a good foundational layer to then dive into things like schema and SEO and structured data and all those pieces. But really just, building that discipline, domain understanding a little bit, and then be like, okay, that's a way to think about it. Now let's dive into the nitty gritty. So,
yeah. Well, that's a perfect place for us to end. Georgie, this was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I'm going to go work on my website a little bit after this. Got a lot of work to do.
Pieces at a time. Don't worry about it all at once.
Yeah. Where can people find you? I assume they can follow you on LinkedIn.
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn, Georgy, Georgy Cohen, georgycohen.com. It's my amazing 4-page website where I say stuff about myself. And yeah, I love talking about this stuff, so come find me. And John, thanks so much for the chance to nerd out with you for an hour. Really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for listening. I want to give you 2 things before you go. Number 1, reminder to sign up for the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my free weekly newsletter for Marcom leaders where we talk about all things content creation and strategy in higher ed. Subscribe at unveiled.tv/newsletter. Number 2, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my name is John Azzoni, and it's spelled Johnazoni. All right, I'll catch you on the next episode, and in the meantime, I'll see you in your inbox. Okay, bye.